So 250 years ago, right now, the revolution was well underway. The American Revolution had been started. The Continental Congress was meeting in this building, Independence Hall. One thing I've been doing every day is just checking letters that the Founding Fathers wrote back and forth to each other. So I figured I'd check today and see if I find anything interesting and share it with you. I've got my laptop right here. So I'm gonna be looking down and checking for letters. There's Independence Hall in the background. Let's start with Washington's weather report for June 1775 on the 9th. Clear after the morning and very warm. That's definitely different than today. It's quite cool out and not clear. It's cloudy. So the letter I found today is to John Adams from an unknown source. Now, if I scroll down into the footnotes, there is some hints at who it may have been from, but generally this person is unknown. So let's start. Again, to John Adams, 9th of June, 1775, exactly 250 years ago, from unknown. Sir, the great character he hath heard of you induces a private man to offer to your consideration the following hints, with an assurance that your regard for your country will improve upon them for the general good of all America. When one colony is declared to be in actual rebellion, and when all the others are announced to be accessory to and favorers of that rebellion, when the sword is drawn and a civil war is actually commenced, every palliative measure will be found ineffectual, and nothing will be more likely to restore peace and a happy union between Great Britain and America, or so effectually preserve the liberty of the latter, as bold, daring, and strenuous exertions of force. In such a situation of affairs, it is not impolitic to suffer the different governors to exercise their several functions, to drain from the people, by their large salaries, parts of the means of defense, to restrain the colonists from defending themselves, and to furnish government with intelligence, how they may most effectively divide, weaken, and subdue them. Is it not still more so to act the same pusillanimous part with regard to the custom house and other officers of the revenue? Doth not common sense dictate to Americans the necessity of strengthening their hands by reassuring all the powers of government, by seizing upon all the revenues of the crown, and by securing the persons of all governors and other officers attached to Great Britain throughout America? It will be needless to say anything of the necessity of striking a very large sum of money, of making it current all over America, and of pledging the faith of the whole continent for its redemption. Is not Holland our natural ally upon the present occasion to supply us with arms, ammunition, manufactures, and perhaps money? Ought not the advantageous treaty of commerce be immediately offered her upon her repaying that assistance against the oppressions of Britain which our ancestors in the reign of our glorious Queen Elizabeth afforded them against the tyranny of Spain? To proclaim instant freedom to all the servants that will join in the defense of America is a measure to be handled with great delicacy, as so great, so immediate a sacrifice of property may possibly draw off many of the Americans themselves from the common cause. Okay, so we can see already in this letter the person who wrote it is concerned that with the start of the rebellion, the start of the war against the dictators of Britain, that the Americans may lose economically in their cause because so many people in the Americas have a vested interest economically in maintaining their personal capital, their private property, that if a rebellion were to hurt them economically, they may flip sides and join Britain just to stay rich. So what they're saying is, shouldn't the Americans partner with Holland, namely the Dutch, to the Netherlands, what became the Netherlands, or what was called the Netherlands, as well as the old word for the Netherlands is Holland. And they're asking, shouldn't we partner with them in commerce to preserve the wealth of the colonies in order to maintain the economic foundation and political stability needed for the success of the rebellion? But is not such a measure absolutely necessary? And might not a proper equivalent be made to the masters out of the large sums of money which at all events must be struck in the present emergency? If America should neglect to do this, will not Great Britain engage these servants to espouse in her interest by proclaiming freedom to them without giving any equivalent to the masters? To give freedom to the slaves is more dangerous, but equally necessary measure. Wow, look at that. To give freedom to the slaves is a more dangerous, but equally necessary measure. So, already we hear the talk of slavery. The question of slavery is one of the great questions that underlies the whole American Revolution. What do we do with the slaves? Clearly in the South, people had their whole wealth tied up in plantations and slavery, and freeing the slaves would have meant the ruin of many of the colonists in the South. But if this were to be a true revolution of freedom in America, if America was to be a land of the free for all men created equal, didn't we need to free the slaves also? And tactically speaking, what if Great Britain offered to free the slaves if the slaves and their masters joined their cause? Wouldn't that be a problem for the American revolutionaries if suddenly all of the slaves were on the side of the British? Is it not incompatible with the glorious struggle America is making for her own liberty to hold in absolute slavery a number of wretches who will be urged by despair on one side and the most flattering promises on the other to become the most inveterate enemies to their present masters? If the inhabitants of Quebec should assist Great Britain, would not true wisdom dictate to the colonies to lead their slaves to the conquest of that country and to bestow that and liberty upon them as a reward for their bravery and fidelity? Might not a considerable quit rent reserved upon their lands and a moderate tax upon their labors stipulated beforehand in a course of years sink the money struck and refund to the colonies the price of the slaves now paid to their masters for their freedom? This question of slavery is a really important topic in the revolution. And it seems like this unknown person sent this letter to John Adams to provoke a discussion on this point. So that's how the letter ends. It's not signed, but I want to read this footnote because it looks interesting. Footnote number 1. The issue of slavery was and continued to be a problem as the colonies moved closer to independence. The author's belief that liberty for slaveholders and denial of liberty to slaves were in conflict was not uncommon, as is indicated by even a cursory examination of the writings of Whig leaders, both Northern and Southern. The writer of this letter was unusual, however, because he not only states the problem, but offers a solution. His plan did not arise wholly from perception of an abstract, if obvious, injustice, but also from events in Virginia in 1774 and 1775. By 9th of June 1775, Virginia and other southern colonies labored under a growing fear that the British, in the event of revolution, would free the slaves and use them against their former masters. These apprehensions were well grounded, for loyalists and their sympathizers had contemplated this possibility for some time. And then it gives some references there. In letters exchanged between James Madison and William Bradford in November 1774 and January 1775, reference is made to attempts to incite the slaves and to a ministerial plan to foment a slave rebellion. In April, a group of slaves seeking to volunteer approached Governor Dunmore, but he refused their services because he was not yet ready for action. Soon afterwards, however, Lord Dunmore, according to a deposition taken from a Virginian, stated that in the event of rebellion, he would be able to count on the slaves for support. By 15th of May, oh wait, sorry, I skipped a part. According to Lord Dartmouth, Dunmore, in a letter to him of 1st of May, stated essentially the same thing. By 15th of May, news of Dunmore's plans had spread outside Virginia, and General Gage noted the anxiety raised among the insurgents by Dunmore's design to free the slaves. From the warship on which he took refuge, Dunmore continued his efforts to raise forces among Negroes until in November 1775, he issued his proclamation freeing the slaves. Wow, in November 1775. The author was, therefore, not so much anticipating Dunmore's final action as he was reacting to an existing situation and proposing a plan to avoid its consequences. His solution to the problem was unique. No other reference to this or a similar plan has been found. In proposing to use Canada as a home for freed slaves and as a source of funds to pay the slaveholders, he obviously was responding to the American desire to take Canada. Beyond being of strategic importance, Canada could become the means to end a conflict between the ideals and realities of the American struggle and forestall the horrors of a slave insurrection. Wow, okay, let's take a little walk here. And, slavery was a major part of the American Revolution, a major discussion. As the footnote said, there were a lot of fears that a slave insurrection would wreak havoc to the economy. Back then, the economy of the colonies was based on slavery. So it's a dark part of the American history. And as we know, the Founding Fathers decided not to free the slaves in the American Revolution. And from the histories I've read, I think a lot of historians agree that is perhaps one of the most important black marks on the American Revolution. It's sort of a failed opportunity to do something right, to free the slaves. And the Founding Fathers couldn't make it happen. They didn't do it. So.